The problem with steroids is that they work, but there's so little trustworthy information on them. You seem to have two groups of people. The natty community, who's very anti-steroids and looks down upon anyone who's using them. And then you have the other group of people who very obviously use steroids but share very little information about them, their cycles, or possible side effects. I've been using PEDs for 9 years, have competed in multiple bodybuilding competitions, and have helped dozens of people utilize them safely and effectively. But when I first hopped on, I used too much too quickly, using compounds that I had no business using because I didn't know any better. So if I could go back, these are the 8 things I wish I knew. So the first thing I wish I knew was my real reason for hopping on in the first place. When I was 29, I hired a coach because after 10 years of being a skinny bitch, I was tired of doing the endless seasons of bulking and cutting and getting fucking nowhere. I wanted to figure out what I was doing wrong and how to actually get jacked. So for the next year, I was taught how to eat properly, how to train properly, and basically all the ins and outs of how to make progress. My coach saw some potential in my physique and asked if I was interested in doing a bodybuilding competition, which I obviously was. So for me, it was a combination of years of consistency in the gym, my age, and the fact I wanted to try my hand at bodybuilding competitions that pushed me into it. Now there seems to be 3 different groups of people that use steroids. The first group are normal people that just want to get jacked. And data has shown that over 75% of gear users fit in this category. They have no specific competitive or athletic goals. The second group are people looking to increase or improve their athletic ability. And the third group are competitive bodybuilders. The second thing is understanding the risks of doing too much too soon and using certain compounds too early on. As I became more exposed to the depths of the gym and competition community, I witnessed countless examples of men in their early 20s running massive cycles only to realize they fucking hate the competition process. And one of these men was a friend of mine who chose to compete because it was the popular thing to do. Like, we were all kind of doing it. So he hired a coach and was instructed to take an insane amount of tren, like over 1 gram a week. High dose testosterone, Anavar, Winstrol, Clen, T3, diuretics, you name it. He ended up getting top 5, did one more show, and then realized he didn't even like competing. But because his cycle was so heavy, it shut down his HPTA excessively hard, and it never came back. So now he has to take testosterone injections every week, and unless he wants to feel like dog shit, he has to do it for the rest of his fucking life. He may never be able to have children, and he was 23 when he decided to stop competing. And this is why you want to start with the lowest effective dose possible and milk that for as long as you can. Because each of us have a slightly different genetic set point in what our body's able to handle as far as compounds are concerned. And once we exceed that level, our body is just going to start shutting down on us. So start low and maximize your ability to grow before increasing. The third thing is making sure you have a bulletproof foundation. I remember watching the Juice Crew at Club Fit doing the same thing year after year. They'd show up looking scrawny and skinny fat right in the early spring. They'd get all juiced up for summer and then would slowly start tapering off towards the end of the season. And as the season would end, so would their frequency in the gym, and we would see them re-emerge in the springtime looking just as scrawny and skinny as they did the year before, just to repeat the process. They obviously didn't understand that if they had a strong foundation, they would have kept most of their gains. I've also seen a ton of examples of guys that use PEDs but don't have their nutrition in check and don't really train hard, and they end up just looking like normal dudes. And what a waste of time, money, and risk that is. So the foundation is built up of a few fundamental pillars of fitness. You have your lifting, which has to be specific to your physique, your goals, and intense enough to actually spark and trigger growth. You need to have your nutrition totally dialed in, meaning you're tracking your food, you have specific macros for your goals, and you're nailing your protein goal on a daily basis. And you also need to make sure that you have your lifestyle in check, including sleep, hydration, and stress factors very well controlled. The fourth thing is getting proper blood work. The benefit of doing blood work before you do steroids is it allows you to get a baseline understanding of what your levels are and what is actually working while you're on cycle. So the things you want to look at with your blood work are your red blood cell count, your liver, your kidney function, your testosterone, and your estradiol. Now there's a few ways that you can go get your blood work done. The first would be to go to your general practitioner or family doctor and just ask for blood work. Now if you're honest with your physician and tell them that you're thinking of running PEDs, they are going to try and talk you out of it. But you can explain to them that you're going to do it anyway and that you're just trying to be proactive to take this as safely and responsibly as possible. Now if you don't have a physician that's quite as understanding, something you can do is Google low testosterone symptoms. And when you go to your appointment, you know exactly what symptoms to explain to prompt them to run these tests anyway. Now, depending on your age and where you live, you may be able to access a clinic that works with this specifically that will know exactly what blood tests to run and get that requisition out for you. So when we're looking at our blood work, we just want to ensure that everything is within the normal range. And once again, with the focus on red blood cell count, liver and kidney function, thyroid function, estrogen, and testosterone. The fifth thing is finding a source. Like when I order Anavar, I want Anavar. Now, there are a few ways to tell if your gear is low quality. First and foremost, you're going to notice a lot more side effects and the gear is just not going to be as effective. So an easy way to find a quality lab is to just do a Google search of best labs in your specific country. And once you have a list of these quality labs, I would go into Reddit and type in, is XYZ lab good? And you should see a lot of people commenting on their experience, either good or bad. Another way you can do this is if you're connected in the gym to simply ask around. Now, I don't recommend going up to the jack dude as a complete stranger and just immediately asking about steroids, but if you create a trustworthy, respectable, and friendly relationship with people at the gym, they should be able to send you in the right direction. So some of the most common side effects I see from low quality gear is going to be really bad acne, people that hold tons of water, and a lot of times we'll also see sleep pattern interrupts, as well as gynecomastia or gyno. The sixth thing is what cycle to run as my first. First, it's important to understand a few things about how the different compounds work, and we can do this by separating them into 3 different families. You have testosterone and its derivatives, DHT derivatives, and nandrolone or 19-nor derivatives. Now, there are some exceptions within each family, but let's just keep it simple for now. Now, it's always important to start with just testosterone first. And the reason for this is it allows you to gauge what dosage of testosterone works for you specifically. So for a first cycle, testosterone cypionate or enanthate would be a good choice without exceeding 300 milligrams per week of either compound. Running this for 12 to 16 weeks is going to give you a lot of progress and really allow you to gauge how well your compound is working for you. After your cycle, you have a big decision to make, and it really revolves around whether or not you want to have kids in the next 2 to 5 years. If you're thinking that kids are in your future, you're definitely going to need a post-cycle therapy. Most post-cycle therapies are going to run right around 12 to 16 weeks, and you have to get blood work to ensure your levels are back to normal and recovered prior to doing another cycle. If you're not going to have kids, you can do what's known as a cruise, which brings your testosterone dosage low enough to keep you within the normal physiological ranges. You can do this for 8 to 12 weeks or as long as you'd like, really, but you just have to make sure that your blood markers are within the normal ranges before starting another cycle. So here we have the beginner cycle roadmap. As I mentioned before, you want to start with testosterone, but as you get into your second and third cycles, you can start adding DHT derivatives. Now, testosterone base is mandatory whenever you're going to include other compounds. And the reason being is that these other compounds will have your anabolic and androgenic ratio way off. And that can create a whole bunch of side effects and doesn't really give you the proper environment for maximal growth. As I previously mentioned, your first cycle should be testosterone only, either enanthate or cypionate at no more than 300 milligrams per week. Then you take your break, and if you're choosing to do a second cycle is when you can add in a DHT derivative. Now, there are injectable or oral DHT derivatives, and the 2 DHT derivatives that are going to give you the best bang for your buck are going to be Primo and Anavar, as they both synergize with testosterone, and they have a very high safety profile. And after another break, if you choose to do a third cycle, that's when you can bring in an additional DHT derivative alongside of your testosterone base. I always recommend people maximize growth using this strategy as it's super effective. DHT derivatives are my personal favorite because I respond super well to them. I love how I look on them because they give me that dry, grainy, vascular look, and I keep the majority of my gains, which is the most important thing to me. They're also a bit safer to use if you're still trying to decide whether or not you want to have children. 19-nors like nandrolone and tren are extremely hard on your system and will shut you down hard for a long time. And that's a big reason why people shouldn't touch these until they're really ready. DHT derivatives are often overlooked as potent mass builders because they don't give you that same like wet, puffy, bloated, gigantic look as 19-nors, and so people assume they're less effective. But that's totally not the case. These compounds are actually more tissue selective than 19-nors and have a higher anabolic to androgenic ratio than testosterone, so they are really effective muscle builders, just without the bloated, puffy look. So now that you're here, things start to get interesting. You have graduated from being a beginner and now you're an intermediate steroid user. So there's a few things that dramatically change when starting to introduce cycles like this. First is cycle length. 12 to 16 weeks is pretty standard, but you can go far longer than that if you choose to and your blood markers permit. It's much more goal specific. Are you trying to bulk? Are you trying to shred down? Are you trying to build mass? Are you trying to cut? And this will determine what kind of combination and compounds you're going to select. Your testosterone dose will also vary from 300 milligrams up to a gram or more per week, depending on personal experience and tolerance. If you're newer in the intermediate side of cycling, I would definitely recommend having no more than 2 grams of gross gear intake per week. For more advanced users, you can bump that up to approximately 3, once again depending on experience and individual tolerance. It's also extremely important you have access to estrogen and prolactin control meds. So here we have the intermediate cycle roadmap. Here we have our testosterone base in the different types, blends, and concentrations. We can also get into synergizers like D-ball, T-ball, and equipoise. And then goal specific is where you're going to get into either your DHT derivatives, your 19-nors, or the combination of both. So the best way to think of this is to choose your desired outcome. Are you looking for dry gains with performance improvements? Or are you looking to gain as much mass as possible and you're okay with some water retention alongside? You're always going to pick your base testosterone. I always suggest cypionate or enanthate, but if you can get your hands on it, you could do sustanon or test 400. The synergizers you can add if you choose to, however, they don't fit in every cycle. Next, you're going to pick your second injectable, whether that be your 19-nor or your DHT derivative. For 19-nors, DECA or MPP is always my first choice, and for DHT, it's always Primo or Masteron. And finally, if you want to, you can pick a DHT oral. Most common, safe, and effective is going to be Anavar, but you can also use Winstrol if you choose to. I also need to touch on 19 NORs, as it's important to understand what they are and how they fit into this whole map. 19 NORs are some of the best mass building and anti-muscle wasting compounds. But as I mentioned, they're also the most suppressive out of all of the steroid families. Even trace amounts can keep your HPTA suppressed for months. So these compounds shouldn't be used unless you're certain you're going to be using anabolics for a very long time. And if you're curious about tren, I'm going to tell you to stop now. You don't need it, it will fuck you up, and for a long time. And now if you're a bit of a psycho like me, you're going to get into more advanced cycles. These should only be utilized after years of work invested into getting your professional bodybuilding status or current professional bodybuilders. This is also when compounds like GH, insulin, tren, and diuretics, among some other things, start getting introduced into the cycles. These cycles are also extremely complicated and very individualized. So there you go. Thank you so much for watching. And if you found this video helpful, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. If you have questions, drop them in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay strong and stay smart.